Let's talk about Defense Secretary Hegseth, because he's been up to some curious things as we are in the thick of a war. I'll start with one of the most alarming stories. The New York Post reports that for the first time in more than a decade, no active duty female officers are likely to be promoted to admiral this year. We've heard other reports of officers of color being passed over systematically for promotions. And it comes as Hegseth is pushing for things like testosterone testing and replacement for troops, which we don't really know how they would impact women in the service. Does it feel like the secretary is trying to create an armed forces that only is hospitable to white men? And how would that impact us as a nation?
Well, right from the beginning of this administration, as soon as Pete Hegseth got the reins of the Department of Defense, started firing black people and women. They don't want black people and women in leadership positions. He's made that perfectly clear. And by the way, he doesn't even try to make an excuse. He doesn't talk about their competence for these jobs. We're losing multiple generations of leadership from the military, valued leadership. He fired C.Q. Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because of the color of his skin. And this is going to have a long-term negative impact until this president decides to fire this guy. Pete Hegseth is by far the most incompetent person we have ever seen in this job, bar none. Nobody close. This guy, I mean, nothing, against the Saturday morning guy and people that, serve, in cable news in the morning, but he did not have the background for this. And he had all kinds of personal problems. And now he spends his time dealing with things that don't matter, testosterone. I mean, we don't need more testosterone in the U.S. military. We need better leadership, and it starts with him.
Now, another Pentagon issue I was particularly interested to get your take on as Secretary Hegseth's response to this low flyover of a crowd by a Blue Angel pilot at an air show in Pensacola Beach, Florida this week that went viral online. The Blue Angels say they are investigating what happened because of concerns about the safety of the maneuver. But Secretary Hegseth issuing a tweet that said, quote, "The flyovers would continue until morale improves," end of quote. It's not the first time that the secretary has come out in defense of conduct that, at the very least, others would find concerning. As a former Navy pilot yourself, who has flown 39 combat missions, and a former astronaut who's been to space, what's your perspective on this?
So here's the thing. The Blue Angels are incredibly professional, as are the naval aviators. And they take this job very seriously. And there are rules with regards to flying over people, a crowd like this on the beach. You generally don't fly below 500 feet. And when the Blue Angels perform an air show, they have a plan, and they do not put the public at risk. As I look at this, he was much lower than that. Now, I did see a statement from the pilot that did this that said, he did not intentionally fly over those individuals on the beach, overshot the turn, was lower in altitude. I think it requires an investigation. It should be done by the Blue Angels or the command, the Education Command, Naval Education and Training Command that controls the Blue Angels. And they need to, take some steps to make sure something like that doesn't happen again, because it can be dangerous. Pete Hegseth, though, is not a serious individual. And he says, we're going to continue these flyovers until morale improves. When you say something like that, you're sending a message to aviators throughout the military that the rules don't matter, that safety doesn't matter, that the public and public safety doesn't matter. And that's a mistake, because that could result in something happening in the future where people get hurt. And the responsibility that the military has to protecting the public. I mean, that comes before anything else.